Good afternoon, dear audience of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada. On behalf of the Institute, I welcome all of you to today's 17th episode of Project IDEA webinar. IDEA stands for Identify, Demystify, and Empower Russian Disinformation Coming Out of Ukraine War. Today, we have invited two special guests from Ukraine. We are greatly indebted to their insights and their interest to share their ideas about what is going on in Russian occupied Ukrainian territories. Before I go, ladies and gentlemen and dear audience, today is a special day in Canada, what we call Truth and Reconciliation Commemoration Day. Today we remember and we recall the historical past of Indigenous people, those who are living in our territory, and how unjustly they were dealt with in the past. Today is the day in Canada we all acknowledge that we have to move forward in the spirit of reconciliation and cooperation. With this little bit of introduction, ladies and gentlemen, let me acknowledge the treaty that we are in. Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada is located on original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of Métis Nation. We also acknowledge the treaties, and we are also promise-bound to work together in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Ladies and gentlemen, as I was speaking before of the Project IDEA is supported by Department of Heritage Canada under the Digital Citizenship Contribution Program, in short DCCP. It supports following objectives to help develop tools and skills necessary to equip Canadians in the face of disinformation and other related online harms, to build capacity to address disinformation and other harms and threats to our country's democracy and social cohesion, and empower Canadians to take steps to mitigate against those harms. This project has basically three objectives and three parts. In first part, analyze and determine trends and propaganda through artificial intelligence tools, demystify propaganda through subject matter experts and Ukrainian participations as you see today, and finally to empower young Ukrainian diaspora through education, through workshops. Today we are also very privileged to have Mr. Gary Senft, our advisor, joining us, and also our consultant Karina Denisyuk, who is also going to be with us for the rest of the session. Before I actually welcome our guests and request them to introduce themselves, let me give you some brief idea about Ukraine as a way of update. So past 7 months, we have witnessed unprovoked aggression of Russian Federation in Ukraine. And recently, we have also witnessed the new military draft has been declared by Russian President Putin. And in this regard, I would like to share with the audience a brief recording, let's say a summary of the events going on in general in Russia with regards to military draft, because we do see the tide of war is changing. Ukrainian military heroically, they have recaptured some of the territories within the country. And we also know that because of this change of tide of the war, Russian Federation has declared compulsory draft in many of the regions, and many of the Russian citizens are not happy about it. So let's have a quick listen to the summary, and this summary is being presented to you, ladies and gentlemen, from NPR. And NPR is a trusted source of information. So have a listen of what is happening in Russia.
Russian President Vladimir Putin declared a partial mobilization of Russia's armed forces on Wednesday morning, signing a decree that will send Russians with military training to join the fight in Ukraine. Military reservists are being told to leave their civilian lives to support Russia's invading army. And he also made what was seen as a threat to use nuclear weapons. He's heard through an interpreter for Sky News.
And if there is a threat to the territorial integrity of our country and for protecting our people, we will certainly use all the means available to us. And I'm not bluffing.
The announcement came as Russia struggles to replenish its fighting force in Ukraine after recent setbacks on the battlefield amid a surging Ukrainian counteroffensive. For more on Putin's speech, we turn now to NPR's Charles Maynes in Moscow. Charles, tell us more about who exactly is going to be sent to Ukraine and when.
Yeah, sure. Really since the beginning of this conflict, the Kremlin has been very careful to frame its actions in Ukraine as limited in nature, presumably because the government is sensitive to what the Russian public will support. So this is a special military operation, not a war. These are professional soldiers fighting on the ground, not conscripts. And in his address this morning, President Putin once again seemed to toe that line. Instead of a national draft, he's offering partial mobilization. Let's listen. So here Putin says that only Russians with military backgrounds will be called up, and first and foremost, that means those who've served in the army and have the right experience. Now, this announcement comes as Russia's campaign has struggled of late in Ukraine. In a separate television interview, Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said there would be an immediate call-up of 300,000 reservists to hold the line in Ukraine. Kremlin officials are hinting it could be much more, though.
Now, additional troops is something hardliners in Russia have been calling for. Is this going to satisfy them?
Well, it would seem so. They've long argued that without mobilizing society, Russia was in danger of losing this conflict. Now, 300,000 more troops will certainly help. The question is, can the Kremlin equip them? Russian forces have been already fighting for 7 months with the loss of weapons and equipment that comes with that. And there have been long reports of shortages of basic gear among the troops. So as we head into winter, just imagine the requirements of now keeping a larger fighting force in the field in sub-zero temperatures.
Yeah, this announcement comes just a day after some Russian-controlled areas in Ukraine announced plans for referendums on becoming a part of Russia. Did he address that as well?
Yeah, he did. Putin said that the liberation of the Donbass, in his words, this is the Luhansk and Donetsk regions of Ukraine. He said that their liberation from so-called neo-Nazis remained Russia's primary goal, and he claimed some success on that front, as well as in areas in Ukraine's south. And Putin told Russians that Moscow had a moral obligation to protect these people from what he called fascist barbarism and defend their right to self-determination. So what does that mean? That means Russian forces are going to provide security as these territories hold a series of controversial referendums aimed at joining the Russian Federation later this week. In fact, the vote gets started on Friday.
How did Putin characterize what's happening in Ukraine? I mean, has he changed his tone at all? And what message did he have for the West and its backing for Ukraine?
Well, he seemed to frame any problems Russia might be having on the idea that his forces were now taking on what he called the collective West, meaning the U.S., NATO, and European allies. So here Putin says the goal of this West is to weaken, isolate, and ultimately destroy Russia. And the tough language didn't stop there. Putin accused the West of providing Ukraine with weapons that could strike deep into Russian territory, even menacing Russia with nuclear threats. And he reminded them that the Kremlin has its own nuclear arsenal and would resort to all available means in the country's defense. And as you noted in your intro, the Russian leader assured that was no bluff.
NPR's Charles Maynes in Moscow. Charles.
So thank you. I think this brief clip from NPR has set the scene of our today's discussion. But I'm very much tempted to also share with our audience a tweet that I have received just a couple of hours ago. And let me show you the clip. This is about the referenda that we have seen in 4 occupied territories, and which is our center of discussion today with our guests from Ukraine. And just have a look. I hope you can see it in large projection. And this is captured actually before I really play the clip. Let me show you the tweet in Russian, and if we translate it, something says home-based voting, level occupation, voting member of the Electoral Commission goes first, sort of thing. And we cannot verify independently the authenticity of the clip here. Nonetheless, this is what is trending in Twitter. Have a look. We can hear somebody is knocking at the door. And the ballot box in hand with the lady. And with this one, the last clip that I'm going to play that I'm showing from Telegram again, and I cannot independently verify the authenticity of the clip, but this is what we have been seeing.
Административных. Кодекса.
So, the audience, I think these two clips and the audio from NPR they have set the scene of today's discussion. And now it's our turn to invite our special guest today, Ina Malisevska from Ukraine and Svitlana. Both are living in Ukraine at this point in time. I would request also our guests to kindly introduce themselves for our audience. And once again, thank you so much. The way we want to conduct our discussion today is to allow them to speak initially, and then with the advisor, Mr. Gary Senft and Karina, will engage them in a dialogue. So without further ado, Ina, floor is yours. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ina, and I am an international programs coordinator at the university in my city, the name of which is Chernivtsi National University. And I'm also a master's student in Ukraine, currently pursuing my degree in linguistics. Just a brief introduction about myself, and thank you so much for having me back. I really appreciate that. In terms of the last talk and today's talk, I feel like a lot has been going on in Ukraine. A lot of news, different kinds of news popped up. And today was a very mixed emotionally day, because obviously I feel like a lot of Ukrainians, maybe every single Ukrainian, has been observing the, I don't even know the proper word that I can choose here, this, I don't know, comedy show that was done in Kremlin, and all of these words that the president of the Russian Federation was using. We've all been observing it, and obviously Ukrainians are ravenous. We feel this strong hatred because these things, these fake referenda that are taking place in our regions, are obviously something that we do not agree with. And I thank you so much for bringing these videos into the discussion, because this material, it's, you know, there are so many videos out there and so many text messages, pictures, and it's a drop in the ocean. But if you really follow what's going on in the occupied territories, you can see how how sham it all is. And I personally, I have two friends who are from Zaporizhia, and I have a friend who is from the city of Melitopol, which is in Zaporizhia region. And these people have managed to move out before the referenda happened, but they have bare contact with their relatives who decided to stay. And the shocking thing for me is that my friends who used to live in the currently temporarily occupied regions, their relatives are scared to speak to them on the phone. They are so terrified being there that when I hear my friends telling me all these stories, I have this one friend, his mother and his grandmother stayed there because his grandmother is disabled and it was very complicated to get her out of there. And them talking, it's just terrifying. They do not support what's going on, but they cannot directly say it because they are scared that they might be imprisoned or killed. And looking at all of this, just, you know, it makes me angry. I feel like it makes every Ukrainian angry because we know how much people in this territory want to be liberated, and the fact that all of these sham referenda are being done against their will is horrifying. I cannot even imagine how I would feel in the shoes of a person who had to be there to witness all of it. And a very interesting thing is that these people in the occupied territories, that they are currently cut off from the social allowance that Ukraine provides them with. So they have to basically survive. And you know, when there are different kinds of information. Obviously, you might go on a Russian website, and you can see how people are ticking yes on this little voting form. And sometimes you understand that perhaps this person had no other choice. You see, maybe there is another, like, I don't even know, this Russian occupier who is gunned standing next to a person, and you don't know what's going to happen. So how can you consider these votes? And they say that the outcome of the voting is so positive. 90% voted yes, 100% voted yes. How can you consider this vote credential if the person was ticking while another basically armed man was standing next to them? This is truly shocking, and I am thankful to the world that the countries, our partners, our allies, the civilized world does not recognize this. And it means a lot because in 2014, you know, the annexation of Crimea and Donbas region, and now we have Kherson and Zaporizhia, and it's very important for the world to support and to confirm that these territories, despite what's going on there right now, are still Ukrainian.
Thank you, Ina, for I would say a very wonderful summary of the situation going on. And I think we have just displayed one of the Russian newspaper online. I don't speak Russian, but Ina, would you kindly tell our audience what is written in this website, please? Unmute.
I'm sorry. So the title states that the residents of 4 liberated, I put parentheses, yes, regions supported the annexation, or like them joining Russia.
Thank you so much. So there are different narratives coming out from Russian territory, and you have rightly heard about Ina's explanation of the 4 territories occupied and how votings are being were conducted. So it's time to welcome Svetlana Onescu to the discussion, and she's also from Ukraine, and she's going to tell us about her take on the situation. Svetlana, please. floor is yours, ma'am. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Svetlana. I'm very happy to be here today, and I'm also from Chernivtsi National University. I am pursuing my master's in linguistics too. And with my opinion on this topic, like I would say that it's very hard meanwhile to talk about this because a lot of information are coming out, and unfortunately very sad information. Every morning you wake up with some bad news, horrific news, with a lot of videos, pictures of destroyed families, destroyed houses, cities all together, and it's very hard emotionally to look after that. And today, from the early morning, we were all waiting for this speech of what is gonna happen, and we all know that under that pressure, as we saw in the video before, that armed men are just coming to your house, and then you have actually no choice. And also before, there was even messages from people who were living there, and they were actually deleting those messages later, that the armed soldiers are coming to your house, and you have two choices. Either you tick yes for actually this referendum, that you do agree to be a part of Russia, or the second option you have is being imprisoned or killed. So it's very hard to understand what they feel, what they experience, because it's unspeakable, I would say. And also they have written that if you do not have any messages from you later, it's either I don't have connection, because they actually cut out from the world. They cannot communicate, they cannot call or something, or either I'm killed. So it's very hard to actually get this information and keep up with that, because relatively saying, we are kind of in a safe place, but every day we are having air raid sirens. For example, today it was twice, in the early morning and also in the evening. And this is a big tension. Whenever you hear those air raid sirens, you are just like terrified, and you don't know what to do actually, because you never know where it's gonna be, when, and just that's crazy to live and actually feel that.
Thank you, Svetlana. We totally trying to understand the situation people are in all the 4 occupied territories, and especially when it is so tough to pick a side, either to participate in the referendum or being imprisoned or killed for not doing so. And it's a very interesting situation, because we in the West, we are trying to understand what are the ramifications of this referenda in the future with regards to the situation in Ukraine and the war itself. Dear audience, now it's time to engage our guests in a conversation. And first off, I would like to request our advisor, Mr. Gary Senft, to kindly step in and have his questions first, then Karina, and I shall be joining up, in between once I have some questions in my mind. Gary, floor is yours. Go ahead.
Very much, Kaiser, and thank you both for joining us from Ukraine, and nice to see you again, Ina. And again, quite a historic day. I think you mentioned, Ina, you've got the issue of the annexation, and then at the same time, an application with respect to NATO on the Ukraine side. So this may, in fact, be a bigger day than we realize when we look back on it a decade or two from now. Again, we're speaking about words, and the words that are used on the Russian side seem so far away from reality that it must be very difficult for the two of you as you try to explain with credibility what's really occurring, when in fact it's incredible what's happening. So we very much appreciate the difficulty that's being faced today. When Ukraine separated from the Soviet Union, was there a referendum back at that time? I believe that was the case. And I'd be interested, I don't know, Kauser, whether that's easily available for you, but what percentage of vote was for Ukraine separating? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was extremely high, including in the Donbass region and other regions. So it is beyond credible, again, that the vote was so clear to go to an independent Ukraine back at that time, and now to be seeking annexation. So I'm not sure. I read an article, but I don't have it right in front of me today to actually be able to give you the numbers. But it was quite incredible, and I think that's part of the testament of trying to understand what's happening today is the history of that referendum as well, back at the time of separation from the Soviet Union.
Thank you. And the audience, before I invite Ina and Svetlana to comment, we quickly just have this document published by OSCE back in 1991. And it says that December 1st, 1991 referendum or presidential election in Ukraine, it has overwhelming voted for independence and choose at that time, Leonid Kravchuk, the chairman of the Republic of Supreme Soviet, as president, and hundreds of foreign observers and correspondents watched as 84% of the eligible voters went to the polls. Over 90% of participants, including many non-Ukrainians, cast ballots for independence. So this is a credible document back in 1991, published by Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe. So possibly I will also add with the Gary's comment. Ina, I understand you, both of you might be very young in 1991, but at least you have heard from your parents or elders about the referendum. And the question here for you both to comment today is that do you at all see the participation has changed, or the motivation of the people in the East or in the South have really changed over these 30 years?
I guess I'll start. First, to begin with, what I've heard from my parents, obviously, I feel like my father describes it as one of the happiest days of his life. He was young at that time, and obviously, they kind of figure out the drawbacks of being in a Soviet Union by then, because my father was the first one in his family to start traveling abroad. And I remember the story that he told me, that for certain amount of years, he thought he lived in the best country in the world, as the Soviet propaganda used to work the same as Russian propaganda works now. And he remembers that one time he went to Poland for the first time, and he couldn't describe the extent of his shock, because he used to be a boy who would use a special talon, I don't even know how it's properly called, to stand in line to get bread for his family. But he went to Poland and visited its supermarket, and he saw the big choice. Obviously, he was shocked. It felt as if his whole world changed, because he lived his young life, his youth, believing in one thing, and then it completely changed. So that's why they were super happy to become independent, because this day signified that they are going to start moving towards a better development of Ukraine. So it's in terms of what I've heard from my father and my parents. And I remember the story, and I tell everybody, because I know that a lot of people abroad, they have this, inclinations toward Soviet atmosphere, Soviet aesthetic. You know, a lot of teenagers, I've seen this on social media, they, for some reason, they like to kind of even praise this Soviet aesthetic. And this is something that I cannot really understand, because I've heard these stories of my grandparents and my parents, and they were so happy to be freed from there. And in 2000, for me, I think I've probably previously mentioned this, but I have a family, I have relatives living in Donetsk. We used to celebrate all of the family holidays together. They used to come to my city. It's a long way because Donetsk is on the other part of Ukraine. So they used to come over all the time. We would have these lovely discussions. We were a family. They are my blood-related relatives. And in 2014, when the war in the eastern part of Ukraine began and when the annexation of Crimea took place, we sort of cut our contact. And I didn't speak to them for a long time, but I remember that in the beginning, when it all started to happen, there were pro-Ukrainian protests in Donbass. There are footage of that. You can find it, and there were pro-Ukrainian protests in Donbass, which, you know, seems, now that Donbass is considered a pro-Russian region, them having pro-Ukrainian protests seems, you know, ridiculous. How could that happen? But these things took place. However, these regions have been under Russian occupation since 2014. They've been cut off from Ukrainian television. Everything has changed there. And the people there in Donbass, and my family, blood-related family too, they believe that for the past 8 years, Ukraine was the one bombing them. And that is why this is my family I'm talking about, and it's heartbreaking to me because this is my blood, but these people have experienced hatred towards me right now, because there are people, they have changed their mind, to answer your question, over the past 30 years. But I truly believe that it's simply because they've been living 8 years under this Russian propaganda that made them believe that Ukraine is the enemy, when in reality, we were just trying to protect our territory. Russia claims that they haven't been in Donbass for 8 years, which is not true. And I feel like people in Ukraine have changed their opinion, but it was forced. That's what I believe.
Svetlana, thank you so much, Ina. Svetlana, please, you are welcome to share your thoughts about the change of attitude from 1991 till yesterday. And we have heard the personal narrative of Ina. So tell us, what do you think about it?
Yes, thank you. So first of all, I would say that from my family talkings and my grandma too, they told that day was the day when they actually became free. It was a very, very happy day. They were excited about that because they finally became free. And as we always lived on the west side of Ukraine, we were extremely happy to be free and so on. And I had some relatives, blood relatives in the west, in the east of Ukraine, Kharkiv, and also Crimea. And unfortunately, on 2014, at first they were also pro-Ukrainian. They knew that it's Russia who is coming to their place, and that they want to take those places and connect them to Russia. And unfortunately, with years, as my family was talking to them, calling them, they started telling like, "Why are you bombing us?" Because I'm sure 100% that everything goes to the propaganda of the TV and also the internet, what they are reading, what they are listening to, everything goes on that actually that Ukraine does that to them. And with time, we lost connection. We stopped talking with them because when you are trying to actually tell that it's not true, that you're listening to the news, which are telling you this, but you do not listen to anyone else, and that's the only thought you can have. And unfortunately, we are not talking anymore because they still think that we are the reason why is it all happening. And the same was with our friends in Kharkiv, but they always stayed with Ukraine, even though they were speaking Russian, but they always claimed that Kharkiv is Ukrainian and it will never be Russia. So these annexations are made of, and they actually force people to this. And I'm sure that people don't really want to become a part of Russia. We always claim that Kherson, Kharkiv, Donbas, Luhansk are Ukrainian.
May I add something, if I may?
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say a very interesting fact, that a lot of people who live in Donbas region, the so-called Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, they have been given a choice to receive a Russian passport, and a lot of them did. But a very interesting fact is that a lot of people who live there and kind of claim that they want to be Russia, they kept their Ukrainian passports, and they use these passports to travel and to receive the social allowances that Ukraine provides them with. There is a border between the Ukrainian controlled territory and Russian controlled territory, and there are people who cross the border at the end of every single month to receive their retirement money or social payment. And if you think about it, this is actually really pathetic, because if you claim that you want to be Russia, you can get a Russian passport and move to Russia. But it fascinates me that these people have the urge and the audacity to keep their Ukrainian passport, even though they might not consider themselves Ukrainian, and use it for their own benefit. And what I'm talking right now is mostly the Donbas region that have been occupied longer. But in terms of Kherson and Zaporizhia region, before they had better connection, and they had connection with the other parts of Ukraine, because now it's really bad to communicate. The communication problems, they occur. But before, when the Russians were just coming into towns and there were not as many of them, Ukrainian people in these regions, they were tweeting and texting that we're waiting for the armed forces of Ukraine. We believe that it's temporary, that the Ukrainian armed forces will just remove all the Russians from our territory. Now they have been almost cut off, and it's very hard. We know from some pieces of videos and picture materials what is going on. We can somehow build this picture in our mind, but we cannot be fully sure. But what I know is that people there, they waited and they keep waiting for the Ukrainian armed forces, and they are not, because I just wanted to clarify that, because I've talked about my family in Donetsk, and obviously there is a huge difference between people in Ukrainians in Kherson and Zaporizhia region and people in Donbas. So that's something I would like to clarify for people to understand better.
Thank you so much. Of course, Donbas region is under occupation for over 8 years now. And of course, the impact of propaganda that we have heard both from Ina and Svetlana are tremendous in shaping people's mind with regards to their position of choice between Russia and Ukraine. So, Mr. Gary, do you have any other questions? If you have, you can go ahead, sir.
But I just think it's important to try to keep in mind facts and truth in an era where things are so confusing. And so with that earlier referendum that we talked about following the breakup of the Soviet Union, there was international observers checking on the referendum to ensure that it was done correctly. In this case, Russia did not invite any international observers in. So the credibility between the earlier referendums and this referendum are very stark and clear. In addition to that, many people clearly and obviously to any thinking person have fled those regions into Western Ukraine or even further into Poland and other countries. So how could you view as credible a vote based on a population where maybe 20 or 40% of the population has fled? And in addition to that, I don't see a large amount of Eastern Ukrainians from those regions trying to flee into Russia. So if you want to be Russian, be free, go to Russia. So it's just an interesting juxtaposition between, what's really occurring and then what Russian propaganda is saying is occurring. So a bit of an observation, Kauser.
Absolutely. And these are very interesting observations brought forward by Gary about the juxtaposition of the situation itself in those occupied territories. Now let's move to Karina. Karina, I know you watch all the news in both Ukrainian and Russian language. So what do you see in terms of information coming out about referenda that we are just talking about? Do you have any questions for our guest? Please go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank you again for joining Inna, and thank you, Svetlana. It's nice to meet you, and we really appreciate it for your presence today. And what I would like to share from my perspective, because I remember I was finishing high school at the time when happened referendum in 1991, and I remember how excited my parents were about this referendum, because they saw this like Ukrainian will be moving into completely different directions, not will living anymore under Iron Curtain as we lived all the time. It was terrible because you're not allowed to travel any abroad. Like I'm really reflecting with Inna, because it's true, we couldn't move anywhere, even to Poland, to Romania. It was like curtain, Iron Curtain. And also it was about freedom, because my grandparents were persecuted for faith because they was believing in God. My grandma was 7 times kicked out from her job because she was a Christian believer. So it's like for them it was a big excitement, and people was coming. I remember when I was following my parents to that referendum. They had like passports, and everything was done as is supposed to be, like no armed soldiers around. You was coming with passport, and only you who was doing your choice, and nobody was pressuring you. And this time it's just show for like fake show on this territory, Zaporizhia territory, Kherson territory, is just show. Because I also have a friend here who arrived in 2014, and her father had pro-Ukrainian position, and those soldiers who entered to Donetsk, he said, if you will keep your pro-Ukrainian position, your house will be destroyed, because I will use all this stuff what I have, what I brought from Russia, all arms, and your house will be destroyed, So actually it's really threatening all the time. It's true, So actually people, it's really scary. They are living these conditions, and a lot of people are waiting for Ukrainian arms to deliver them, because like also my brother has friends who is living in Izium. We just have, I don't know, it's like maybe few weeks ago, Izium was liberated. City Izium, close to Kharkiv. It's half an hour from Kharkiv, I guess. And he said it's a big traumatic experience, because his sister, friends of my brother friend, he has sister who lived in Izium. Russian soldiers took her mobile phone, and daughter, she's 14. She was speaking before. Right now, I don't know what's happened with this child, but right now she just lost speech when she brought, like a few weeks ago, she arrived to Chernivtsi, to my hometown where my parents live, and this child stopped to speak. It's a really traumatic experience for those people who live in there in Ukraine. What I would like to add from this perspective, it's like we really hoping, so with God's help, very soon our Ukrainian troops will enter to this territories and everything will be again Ukraine.
Thank you, Karina. It's a wonderful reflection. So let's move on to one particular question that comes to my mind, and this is for both of our guests. I would like to know your opinion / comments about the nature of disinformation about the referenda itself. What do you see both in Russian media as well as within Ukraine? Let's say not in the regular electronic and print media, but Telegram channel elsewhere. What kind of messages that you are witnessing about the referenda itself, and what would be the next move of Mr. Putin after the referendum has been done and it was already declared that 92% to 98% wanted to join Russian Federation? So tell us in a brief manner the nature of information that you see available in all the social media platforms.
Okay, so in terms of information regarding the referendums, I mean, I follow both Ukrainian and Russian Telegram channels, and I try to have a variety of sources I read and observe, and it can be a popular TV network having a Telegram channel, or just a civilian who's doing this, who's just updating his Telegram channel. And I mean, from the Ukrainian side, obviously, the Ukrainian government, we don't hide that what's going on there. They expose that the Russians are doing referendums, and they post whatever videos, photos, text they might have. And obviously, the Ukrainians, as I mentioned before, they react negatively towards it. But I also observe Russian news, and maybe you've seen it, but today at the Red Square in Moscow, people were chanting and celebrating and having concerts, and they have started posting photos as like welcome back home to the region that they called Novorossiya, which is I'm not sure if it's the same in English, but this is how it sounds in Russian.
New Russia.
Yeah, New Russia. Yeah, this when you think about, okay, if I have so many thoughts, I'm trying to collect them. So when you think about a few days back, when the draft, not a few days back, but longer, draft mobilization started, and for some reason Russians started to go out and protest, and it's you have to, like, when you see that, you might have mixed emotions, but you need to understand the reason why they are protesting. They were not protesting against the war. They were protesting against the mobilization, because this war was not happening in their territory. And now, out of a sudden, their president announces a partial mobilization. And not all these, but a lot of Russian men are under risk to be mobilized and get sent to Ukraine. And obviously, they were furious about it. And it's very important to remember what they were protesting about, because I do not agree with the fact that people praise men who escape from there and people who protest there, because they did not protest against the war. That's one of my main points. And now, if we think from these days back when they were protesting against mobilization, and now that they are chanting and celebrating the annexation of Ukrainian regions, this is just, to me, this is ridiculous. If we think about February 24th, when the president of Russia addressed to his people that they are liberating Donbas region, why then are you annexing Kherson and Zaporizhia, which it was not a part of the plan? Like, if you have common sense, okay, something is not right. They were meant to liberate Donbass, but now they're annexing the Ukrainian territory further. And a lot of people say that why doesn't Ukraine just give up its territories and this war would be over? No, it wouldn't. They would go further. And today we saw that they are ready to do these sham referenda. And I really think that after today, there will be escalation. We felt it with Svetlana on our own skin because we haven't had air alarms for a week, I think, and today we've had 2. An air alarm, when we hear these sirens outside, obviously it's scary because you understand that there is a threat of a missile hitting your city. And typically when Ukraine is winning in the counteroffensive, or if Ukraine takes very major decisions, Russians start to hit our cities with missiles. And I feel like what we've experienced today was Russians' response to our not agreement, but our decision to join NATO. So I think that the situation will definitely escalate, and we as Ukrainians, we try to prepare for anything. If the usage of nuclear weapons was kind of a joke to us a long time ago, now I don't feel like a lot of Ukrainians don't take it as a joke, and this is also an important point to make.
Thank you, Ina. Thank you. It's absolutely a very complex situation. Svetlana, please go ahead with your comments, please.
Yes, so totally, as Ina has mentioned, there's absurd of actions and disinformation about everything, how they said like they are liberating Donbass and Luhansk, and they are just going further and further. And the thing, what we know for sure, they will never stop. It will never be enough for them. They will go further and further and further. And the only thing that they are going to bring is destruction. They are destroying cities, they are destroying everything on their way, but they will never do something good. They will never make the city as it was before. So unfortunately, that's why we don't want them in here, never, because we know from our history what they have done to Ukrainians, and they have always despised us. We have been always something worthless because we are Ukrainians. We shouldn't have our Ukrainian language. We shouldn't have our culture, anything, because what I think, they are jealous. They do not have this in Russia, and they see how we grow, how fast we grow, how much we have to show the world how good we are. And they are just jealous, and they want to take everything from us over and over and over. So this is a very, very sad point. And whenever I'm thinking about this, it makes me angry because I just do not understand the point. Why to come in here? Why to kill so many people? Why to destroy lives? Why to bring back us to like at least 10 years back? Because to rebuild it again, bring it back to normal, it's gonna take a lot of time. And every day, whenever you hear this air raid siren, you have shivers actually. And even if you think that, okay, maybe it's not gonna come to your city, still you feel kind of terrified. You don't know how to act and what to do. So this is a very, very sad point about that. And as I've seen before the videos, Russians were asked, why are you doing this? Like, do you agree with the actions of killing people, of the war in Ukraine? And they were agreeing. They said like, yes, they deserve that. And the question, why do Ukrainians deserve that? And the answer was like, because they are Ukrainians. There is no grounds why, but Russians do actually agree that Ukrainians have to die. And this is very, very actually outrageous and ridiculous, because we are all humans, we are all the same. Why on earth would you actually want someone to die or to be killed? So this is something which actually I cannot understand, and that's just crazy.
Absolutely. Like you, we also don't understand why in this century, even there is a war which is unprovoked without any previous conflict. Dear audience, we are absolutely at the last part of our session today. Before I leave the session and say goodbye to our guests, we do ask a simple question. Ina and Svetlana, what would be your messages for Ukrainians living here, Russians living here in Canada, with regards to war, with regards to disinformation, propagating through many channels? And in this regard, let me also share with you that we have reached out to Russian community here, and we have not received much response from them so far. But of course, we have come across some of the young Russian students, and they spoke with us in a manner of podcast, and we asked them what are their takes on the war itself and the future itself. So with this one, my question to you, tell our audience about the referenda itself, the future of Ukraine, and as Ina is predicting the escalation of war. So, in general, your messages to Ukrainian diaspora and Russian diaspora living in Canada. Go ahead.
So despite the sham referenda that are taking place right now, I believe that this is something very temporary, because the anger that we feel actually makes us want to fight even harder. And people in Ukraine and abroad, people living abroad and supporting war, everybody is doing something that is contributing to the victory of Ukraine. The soldiers are standing and they're fighting back. The Ukrainians who are in safer regions, they're helping in terms of humanitarian aid, in terms of psychological assistance, in terms of donations. And same goes for the Ukrainians and the international community that is helping us drastically. And I feel like it's the whole world, civilized world, fighting against a fascist country. That's how I see it. And even though the situation, I think, it's my opinion, will escalate, and since winter is coming, it's going to be a tough winter, it's without a doubt. I believe that we are ready for any obstacles, and we, even on the 7th month of the war, we still feel great support from other countries, from the world. And I believe that with the help of the world and with our armed forces, with everything that we receive, the humanitarian aid, we will stand strong. And I truly believe that we will be able to remove all the, trying to find the right word, all the negative occupiers, people that came uninvited to our land, and that Ukraine will regain all of its territories and be free and blooming. And this is how I see it, and I don't think there's any other way.
Very politely saying negative people. Thank you so much for the particular phrase that Ina used today. Svetlana, please go ahead.
Thank you. I totally agree that victory is on our side, and I hope that it's gonna happen as soon as possible, because at the very beginning of the war, actually, I could not believe that it can last so long. I truly believe that it's gonna be like 2 weeks and that's gonna be over, but unfortunately, it's the 7 months, and I really, really believe that it's gonna finish like maximum month, and I hope it won't escalate. And what I would say, the only thing to do right now is never give up. continue helping, donating, whatever is possible in our strength, because people on the front line, they are doing everything in their powers to actually keep us safe, to remove those negative people away from here. And I hope they will never come back ever, and they will actually change their minds, which is very hard to say. I'm not sure about that. But hopefully one day they will actually understand that there was their choice to invade us, but not Ukrainians bombing themselves, which is ridiculous. And hopefully it is gonna finish really soon.
Thank you. Thank you both, Ina and Svetlana, for being with us from Ukraine this afternoon. And what a wonderful articulated discussion today we had. We have had with the guests, and we understand the polarization that occurred in the country itself. And both the guests shared their narratives, their family members, and how this war poisoned the minds of people, even the family members. And this is what is important takeaway, that the impact of disinformation, propaganda, that can polarize a whole society itself if it remains for a longer period in place. And this is important takeaway from our today's session, that the hope and resilience of people like Ina and Svetlana, who shared with us that they believe firmly that Ukraine will remain free despite this aggression. And importantly, the audience, please recall what Ina said clearly, that sometimes there are discussions even in the UN General Assembly, UN Security Council, that in order to end the war, why not we do a negotiated settlement, quote unquote. This term is often used to in the policy circle in the United Nations to end war, the end hostilities, and to save lives. But what does this mean actually? Negotiated settlement is possibly asking Ukraine to agree to lose some of their territories to Russia. But remember, dear audience, what Ina said, that this is not going to end like that, because Donbass was possibly thought that this is what Russia wants since the beginning of the conflict in 2014. But look what happened. Russia kind of annexed 2 more regions, Zaporizhia and Kherson, as we have just heard. And this is what is going to continue, as we have heard from Ina, that this is never-ending annexation of a nation state with distinct cultural identity and historical contribution to the humanity. So I would leave the audience with these profound thoughts and the resilience of the nation of Ukraine and its people. As you see, 2 young ladies shared their minds with us. And we'd also like to say from Canada that we stand beside you and will continue to do whatever it takes to support you from distance, and from our material and moral support always will remain with you. And our messages to Ukrainian diaspora and Russian diaspora living here is the same, that this war is unjust, and people were being killed without any reason. And this killing goes on in both sides. A couple of days ago, BBC and Al Jazeera was covering the liberated territories, where we have seen the footages of dead Russian soldiers littered around the street. So the message to the Russian people, those who are watching our show today, in the live stream, that this is unnecessary, absolutely unnecessary loss of lives. And you have heard from Ina and Svetlana that it doesn't make any sense that people have to die just because of being Ukrainian. And this is really shocking for all of us to realize this fact over these past 7 months. And with this, I would like to end today's show. Once again, our deep gratitude to Ina and Svetlana for being with us. It is almost midnight in Ukraine, and we also thank for their insights and their messages. I think is going to last long with our audience. And finally, on behalf of the Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada, dear audience, as I mentioned in the beginning, today is the Truth and Reconciliation Day. We are remembering the difficult past of our nation with regards to our indigenous people. We reconcile with the past, and we would like to continue working hard with our indigenous group. And the message is every child matters, and this is an Orange Heart Day in Canada, and we deeply respect the lives lost in the past from our indigenous communities. Thank you very much, dear audience. Please stay tuned. We'll come with more interesting episodes on this project idea. And thank you very much for your support. And good night for our guests in Ukraine. And for Canadians, please enjoy the rest of the day, whatever you wish to do. Thank you and bye-bye.